Wildlife Federation's The Hide.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Wildlife Federation's podcast, The Hide. Today we have a special guest with us, Joel Kleefisch, master chef.
That's a stretch, Mark.
It's not a stretch. He's a fantastic cook, and today we're gonna make
wild turkey pot pies. And Taylor's here, and he's a game bird ecologist for the state of Wisconsin. You're working on the Hide now. People out throughout the state are hunters and fishermen, but a lot of times they're afraid when you talk about wild game, bringing it from the field to the table. And of course, that's kind of key to being a conservationist if you're a hunter, right? So today, we're going to show you guys how to make wild turkey pot pie, and you can use any meat with this. You don't have to have wild turkey. You can use chicken, turkey from the store. You can even use pheasant. You can even use venison, venison tenderloin, a venison roast, anything like that. But it's really easy, and that's why we're going to show you how it goes today. The first step in that, everybody's got their game from the previous season in the freezer, right? Well, this is a frozen block of wild turkey. My daughter Violet actually got this fall season. So it's really fresh. We just got it this fall. Take your block out and you're going to put it in your Instant Pot. And if you don't have an Instant Pot, here's the key. You can use a crock pot. An Instant Pot is a pressure cooker. It just takes a little longer, but it's the same as using a crock pot, but you need more time. So you put that right frozen in your pressure cooker pot, then you're just going to add water. When you add water to it, that's going to eventually become your stock. Your stock is essentially like bouillon cubes. You need to dissolve them in water. You're making it naturally using the flavors of the meat that are going to render down into the water while it's cooking. So the first thing you do is put your water into your pot, whether you're using a crock pot or an Instant Pot, and bring it right to the top level of whatever meat you have in. I find that's an easy way to explain it. You put your meat in and put your water in right to the top of that, and that'll give you enough stock to create a nice gravy for whatever you're doing.
Now, do you mix anything in there with the...
So that's the key. Obviously, flavor is what you're trying to create, especially with the stock, because the stock's going to be the basis for your gravy, which is going to go in the pie. Here's a quick secret. Go to the store and pick yourself up some Italian dressing seasoning mixes. They have a bunch of different flavors, and they're already pre-portioned, so you don't have to worry about it. You want to put one of those in, and you can do this if you prefer ranch seasoning. Put ranch seasoning in.
And it doesn't matter the difference between crock pot or Instant Pot?
Crock pot, Instant Pot, same exact recipe.
Perfect.
So start out with that. Then I'm a garlic fan. Some people don't like it in their kitchen. I love it. I don't measure. I'm Italian. Dump in some garlic. That's quite a healthy amount, and it's going to smell and taste great. Today we're using two of the Provider spices, drop thyme and fowl. Now the fowl's got kind of a sweet and savory taste. It's used with wild game a lot, with wild ducks, waterfowl. And drop thyme is got kind of a tangy, savory, and bold. It's got some dill in it. So I'm going to use these two seasonings, and just whatever your favorite seasoning is, just add it to taste. Here's a little warning. Don't over salt right off the bat, because there's some people who love a ton of salt and some people who don't. Salt does not change something when you're cooking it compared to when you add it later. A lot of other seasonings that have got natural plants in them, they will change as they cook. Salt is not one of them, so don't be afraid to add salt later.
So real quick, somebody's gonna ask, where do they get that specific seasoning?
The Provider spices and rubs. Go on The Provider Life on the internet. Just put in The Provider Life. You're going to come up with Instagram, recipes, a website for the Provider and the Provider Life seasonings and rubs. And we're bottling a sauce now for chicken wings. And we've got a cookbook too. That's going to take you real easily through a lot of the ways to cook wild game. Make it for your family. They're going to be blown away once it hits the table that it's actually wild game. And that's part of what we're doing here, is kind of mainstreaming wild game. People are afraid to mainstream wild game. And the reality of it is, as more people want to eat naturally, organically, they're moving toward wild game. So
shout out. I was just at the National Wild Turkey Federation, and I picked up the Provider cookbook, and I am super excited.
Yeah,
my wife is trying to make food for wild game for her has been a challenge, but there's so many awesome recipes in there that I'm really looking forward to it.
Yeah, it's great, and it makes it easy for you if you don't know what you're doing. You just follow the directions. Pretty soon, you're like me. You're not measuring anything.
Right.
So next I put some ground white pepper in just to taste. White peppers I really like because it does add a little bit of a peppery flavor, but it's kind of a creamy peppery. It's not that bite that black pepper has.
Yeah, it's mild.
And a lot of times you want that bite from black pepper, but when I'm cooking in a crock pot, I like to use white pepper. And then I always put a little bit of onion powder. The reason I use onion powder is because some people don't like those onion chunks.
Right.
I do. Some people don't, but you get the flavor of onion without the onion chunks in it. Everybody's happy. I'm always kind of going for the everybody's happy. Here's one of the surprise ingredients that people don't understand when they're cooking wild game. You want to add a fat to it. You can use a stick of butter, which is great, the best. You can use olive oil or cooking oil. The reason you're doing that is because the wild game is so lean. It's real fibrous meat. The protein's real fibrous. So when it's breaking down in the crock pot or the Instant Pot, you want to add an oil to it. That will help the stock absorb back into the meat, and we'll show you how that happens later. So just add a healthy dose. I usually add even a cup of it because it's not going to hurt you when you're making your gravy, and it's going to absorb into the meat while it's cooking. So about a cup and a half of oil, fat of some sort. You can even use Crisco. You can use butter.
And you use that for even like venison or,
Oh, yes.
stuff?
Every meat. I put it on every meat because if you really look at a piece of wild game, whether it's from a deer, an elk, pheasant, it's got no fat in the meat. The fat, and especially the fat on cervids, is a real waxy fat. So you don't want that in your cooking. And then here's another key ingredient. When it comes to breaking down enzymes, when people say the wild gamey taste, now I don't taste that anymore because I like that taste of wild game. Acid counters the pH, which is where the gamey flavor is. So I use lemon juice just again because it makes most people happy. If I'm cooking just for me, I prefer lime juice. So add about half a cup or so of lemon juice to that. And just like that, this thing's ready to go in the crock pot or in the Instant Pot, in this case, the pressure cooker. Gonna throw it in, cap it up. Then come set your Instant Pot. With frozen meats, I'm usually setting it to 2.5 hours. So you want to set it to pressure cook first, hit the timer, and then just dial it up. Whatever kind of pressure cooker you're using, I usually go about 2.5 hours. And what's going to happen then, every hour I tell people is equivalent to about 4 hours in a crock pot. So if you're going to make this in a crock pot, I go 8 hours on high. The only problem you have to watch on a crock pot is if it's too high and it gets too hot, it will burn the broth, and you don't want that to happen. So we're going to set this for about 2:30. Press start and walk away. Go read a book. Go take a bath. I know, Kakich, you're a big bath guy, so you get
It's all I had. It's all I got, man. It's all I got.
You get the fine wine and sit down and have a bath, don't you?
We're on your playing field. Yes.
All right, so we'll be right back continuing this recipe. Well, through the magic of television, we're going to show you what that turns out like after it spends about 8-9 hours in the crock pot or 2.5 hours in the Instant Pot, which is the pressure cooker. So your meat is going to start falling apart. Now, this is not exactly what it looks like when it's done. When your meat is done, shred it like crazy. For this, I like to use a blender and actually put it right in the fibers of the meat and shred it all up as much as you can, and then it will absorb that stock back in it. So the stock that's in there around it will absorb back into the meat. Now, this is delicious just on its own.
Smells good.
Yeah, it's awesome. But this is going to be the basis for our gravy. Now, the scary part for a lot of people is making a roux. I'm going to tell you, it's so easy. You got to make a roux because that's what magically turns the broth into the thick, rich gravy, okay? So the first thing you're going to do to that is start with a stick of butter. And the easiest way to remember the best way to cook a roux is 50-50. The same amount of fat to the same amount of flour. I like to start with butter because it tastes better. Let that butter melt down. And a stick of butter is a cup of butter. So when you are melting a stick of butter, you know you're going to want around a cup of flour to go with it. Maybe a little less. when you're making a roux, you want it to end up at kind of like a soft Play-Doh consistency. And that's the magic that's going to turn your broth into gravy. And it's a chemical reaction that will thicken it, and we'll see that when it happens. So the first thing you do is you let that butter, or if you're using oil, heat up and start to kind of bubble, but make sure you don't burn it.
So I'm doing this for the first time, and I put too much flour in there. What do I do?
Well, when you're at the roux stage, it's no problem. Just add some oil or butter.
Okay.
Thin it back out. And I'll show you what that means once we get our butter melted down here.
So for your roux, do you add your seasoning after you start mixing things in, or will you add your seasoning with your flour?
Well, here's the magic. We put all the seasoning in the crock pot or in the Instant Pot, the pressure cooker with it. So this broth in here has already completely flavored. And the beauty of that is once you make your gravy, you can taste test it and then can add at that point, because your gravy is going to be bubbling and simmering, and it's a good time to add those spices that still change flavor. And it's an okay time to add a little salt if you want it saltier.
Or more garlic.
Or more garlic. I mean, never enough garlic. So our butter is melting down here, and you can see it's in the pan. It's warm, but it's not bubbling yet. I like to let it bubble before I add my flour. And that's because when you're making a roux, you're actually kind of cooking it. Otherwise, it has a bit of a raw flavor or taste to it, and you don't want that in your gravy. But it's much easier than you think. People are real afraid to make gravies. Oh, the gravy's lumpy, the gravy's this, the gravy's that. It's oftentimes because they're afraid of the word roux. So now you can see that the butter's bubbling. Now I'm going to take my flour and I'm going to sift it over the top of that. That's about a cup or so. And you're going to stir that in. And as it stirs into the oil that's in there, the fat that you're using, see what I mean about that kind of Play-Doh-y consistency? But part of the key to this is you want it to cook in there. You don't want it to burn, but you want to kind of keep it separated. And look at that. It just looks like you got lumps of Play-Doh in there. And that is your roux. It's just oil, it's just a fat and flour, but that's what's going to magically turn your broth into gravy. Now, we can skip a step. Usually you sift out the stock and make the gravy. It's easy enough to do it because we've finally shredded all the meat down. So we're just going to add all that right into the roux. At this stage of the game, I like to grab a whisk just because when people talk about gravy lumps, there's no better way to get them out than whisking it together. So our turkey and our stock from the turkey was already hot, and our roux is hot. And we're going to we're keeping it on medium to medium high until it starts to bubble. Then we're going to knock it way down. And you can already see, guys, what's happening in here, Khaki.
She's thinning out.
Thickening up.
Thickening, you mean, not thinning. If it was thinning, we'd be in the wrong direction.
Thickening.
So it's starting to thicken already. And I mean, no joke. Look at this. It's turning into an absolutely beautiful, aromatic,
it smells delicious
gravy. And this is wild turkey. And people get so caught up on, oh, wild turkey's dry or wild turkey's that. Turn it into something that the whole family's going to eat and be begging for more at the next holiday. And it will amaze you how delicious you can make this wild game. So now you see how quickly that turned from just a real watery stock into a nice, thick, rich gravy. And from here on out, folks, it's really mostly about assembly. I'm all about shortcuts, especially when it's your first time around. Get yourself a bag of peas and carrots. Get yourself whatever kind of vegetables you like. Some people like beans in their pot pies. I'm not a big bean fan. I'm gonna have to get a scissors to cut this though. You know, with the arthritis, you get older, you can't tear bags open like you used to. Taylor, you don't know what that's like yet because you're too young.
No, he's 26
Now you
probably.
see this bubbling through, so I'm going to knock it all the way down to the lowest simmer.
Okay.
And remember, when you add your vegetables, you're also adding a little bit of water. So that'll thin it back out a little bit. And when you're in this stage, let's say you think it's a little thick for your taste, that's real easy. Just add more stock. Add more stock to it, add more
Sure.
bouillon, a cup of bouillon if you want. But I think this looks like pretty darn good
Looks good to me.
consistency for what we want our pies to be.
Especially when you make some homemade bread to go with it, right?
Oh, yeah.
Where's yours?
We'll get on that.
You don't want me making it.
People say, do you have a bread maker? Yeah, my wife points to me. So you can see now what a perfect filling this is going to be for pot pies. So now it's just a matter of assembly. Look, you can make homemade pie crust. That's great. But for this show and to get people cooking, you're going to see us make this entire pot pie in a couple hours. And the couple hours is really about just cooking the meat, whatever meat you have, and creating the stock. But assembly for it is really pretty easy. Get yourself a frozen pie shell to put on the bottom. Get yourself a refrigerated pie topper to put on the top. And the next thing you're going to do is ladle out your filling. Just ladle your filling into your pie shell. Oh my gosh, I am so hungry making this right now.
It looks good.
And the beauty of it is this will be completely done in about 20 minutes. And once your meat is cooked, a little secret I do, I'll cook the meat in the stock and then just take the meat and stock and freeze it in the freezer. Then if you want a pot pie, you're literally 20 minutes away from thawing it in the microwave, making a roux, and making a pot pie. Now, you've got that covered. You take your pie filling topper, or your pie crust topper, roll it out. So I'm going to tell you something else. Hunting in the great outdoors in the state of Wisconsin is fantastic, and Wisconsin's got a ton of great public land. But a lot of us, if you want a chance to hunt private land, one of the keys to doing that is meeting farmers and asking permissions. There is nothing better than bringing these pot pies to a farmer and offering it to them, or saying to a farmer, this is from a turkey I harvested on your property and I just want to say thanks. And doing that will show them that you're not just using their land. You're using a resource that you appreciate, and you appreciate the privilege it is to go on someone else's property and harvest something. So take a fork, press the sides. Here's what I love to do when I'm delivering it to a farmer. I'll spell their name right in the top. So let's say this is going to Farmer Kakich. I'll make a K right on it. That way when it goes in the oven, it's going to come out with a K. Once that's on the top, take your scissors or a knife, cut around the outside, cut off the excess of that top. And look, folks, I'm not trying to stop you from making a homemade pie crust. If you got a family recipe or you want to make a homemade pie crust, have at it. The ingredients are the same. Next, you're going to set your oven to 350. It'll preheat. You can throw it in there on the preheat. This is just going to cook until the top is golden flaky brown, and you're ready to serve or deliver this. Now we wait to eat. All right, Kakich, a moment of truth. Open the oven. Let's see how these babies turned out.
Play the music.
Dun, dun, dun. Oh, yeah. Perfect. Once that top gets kind of golden brown and bubbly.
Looks delicious.
Ready to go. There's yours with the K on it.
Well, it's special.
Yeah, well, you're special, so you got a matching pot pie. All right, we're going to let them rest for just a minute and we'll cut them open. All that's left is to slice it up and serve it. If you let it rest for a while, it won't be quite as soft, but you can see that crust is perfect. Now, just separate it carefully from the bottom. Oh yeah, perfection on a plate. And there's nobody, wild game eater or not, who's not gonna love that.
All right, well, Joel, I thank you for inviting us to be part of this and really showing us exactly how to utilize the resources that we can, go out and we spend all this time to manage, and then all of the time to scout, all the effort that's put into it, and then to table it up and put it right on plates at the end of the day is really something special.
It's awesome. I love having you guys here, and I know that you guys are absolutely committed to taking stuff from the field to the table provider style, and love being a part of it.
So it's been great.
Yeah, no, I just want to, say thanks again, and, you're a great sponsor for the outdoors and conservation, and,
I love it.
we look forward to the next segment with you.
Yeah, keep eating wild.
Awesome. So again, thanks everyone. We appreciate you tuning in for this episode, and we want to thank Grit and Chase Baker for putting this all together. We got some just what he does is instrumental to what we do here. So thanks. We'll see you guys at the next episode. Thanks, Joel.